Hello everybody. The weather's nice and I'm out for a walk. I've come up on the pavilion, so I think I'm going to sit down a little bit, maybe read the Bible a little bit here. What we have to do in following our instructions, let me see if I can get my phone on the tripod down here. There we go. We have to do this every day. It's like chores. Now, we should love doing it, but if you do anything long enough, it stops being fun and is more of a chore. So what do? You find ways to make it fun. It's like if you're married or with a partner, you've got to find ways to make life together fun. So change it up, do things. So I'm going to read a couple of commentaries out of my Bible. I have the real thing with me, and they've got commentaries. I'm here looking at the lake. There's a couple of fishermen down there I got to go talk to. You got to pay to fish here unless you have an annual pass, and I've only signed 2 of them, and I don't recognize the vehicle. So I'm going to go talk to them as soon as I get this recorded. So you find ways to deal with. We need to pray daily. If you pray the exact same prayer every day, like the Lord's Prayer, and you just quote it, it can get boring. So change it up. You can do it simply by reversing the order, or it's a template. Change it out. Give us this day our daily lasagna. However you want to do it to make it fun. God understands what we're doing. I don't want to live on bread and water. They served that in the ancient days to the military and in prison. Crows are making a lot of noise today. I've seen deer this morning. I've seen turkey. We've actually got a couple of roosters in here that were brought in. Roosters as in chickens. The guy who has them wants to see if they survive, and if they do, he may bring in some hens to go with them. 2 roosters and then 2 or 3 hens. That ought to give them enough to lay a few eggs. So let's take a look at some of our stuff here. Title of this, coming out of Luke, God our Father waits with open arms. We can learn much from the Pharisees. Don't assume you have a corner on understanding God. They did. There were only 10 commandments, but by the time Moses and the Pharisees got together and created books of laws, there's no way anybody could do any of them. You can't do the 10, let alone add another 500. It seems like the Pharisees, reading on, just wouldn't listen. Each time they questioned Jesus or tried to trap him, they were the ones walking away looking foolish. In Luke 15, which is what this is about, we find 3 of Jesus' most famous parables. Their fame may have something to do with the fact that they all drive home the same point. Again, the context is critical. This time, the Pharisees didn't try to challenge Jesus publicly. Instead, they simply marveled at the company Jesus kept. Like he said, the healthy don't need a doctor, just the sick. So he hung out with the sick. And they said, this man receives sinners and eats with them. In response to their being appalled that all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him, Jesus shared 3 parables. The first 2 are relatively straightforward. A man with 100 sheep lost one and went out to search for it. It's given verses here, so I guess I can throw those in. It's Luke 15 and 4 through 7 would be the verses where he lost one and went to search for it. Next, a woman had 10 coins, lost one, and went to search for it. In both parables, the man character called on friends and neighbors to join in rejoicing that the one that was lost has been found. The point of each parable is that Jesus is seeking to save the lost. We're all lost. Now, as Christians, we're not lost, but we can still wander off. Heaven rejoices when one sinner repents. Well, we're all sinners, which means we're all going to sin, which even as a Christian, we can sin and then repent. So don't exclude yourself from this. This is part of what the Pharisees were having trouble with. They didn't think they were sinners anymore. Often the obviously sinful company Jesus kept was more responsive to God than the self-righteous religious leaders. Jesus then told the parable of the lost son. Many refer to this as the story of the prodigal son. Now, we all know that one. However, the hero of the story is not the wayward son, but the waiting father. While the son was off squandering all that his father had given him, the father stood watching and waiting for his son to return. When he did, the father threw aside all dignity and ran to the lost but now found child. Do not overlook Jesus' emphasis on the other brother in the parable too. He does not rejoice in his brother's return. He also needed to accept his father's love. His irritation is an obvious connection to the initial complaint of the Pharisees and the scribes in Luke 15, 1 and 2. So I'll just read Luke 15, 1 and 2. Then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him. And the Pharisees and the scribes complained, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he spoke this parable to them. And the commentary just covered that. A lot of this stuff is very obvious when you're reading this stuff. But the commentaries are helpful. You can't just read the commentary and think you've read the Bible. There are an addition to the Bible. It's like the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Torah, were the foundation for the Jews. All the other books in the Old Testament came in gradually. But they started writing the Talmud and the Mishnah right away because it became a status symbol, where one of the local Pharisees gets to write his comments of what he thinks, this means in Deuteronomy or what it means in Genesis. The people didn't remember any of the scriptures because they didn't have a handy-dandy Bible nearby. If they didn't go to the synagogue and they didn't participate, they had no idea. Now, some were chosen, mostly the young ones. The religious leaders, the priests, would go about the countryside, and as they saw a young man, typically it would be a young man, this was patriarchal back then, they didn't go after the women to help out. But if they found a young man who looked bright and promising, they'd simply say, "Follow me." Sound familiar? That's why these young fishermen were quick and able to follow Jesus. If a priest wanted you to follow them, it was important. There was some gain for you and your family in this. So they did. And they didn't live as paupers. Now, I'm not preaching, this rich theology that these pastors who live in million-dollar mansions and fly around in jets. I'm not preaching that. But I'm also not saying that we should be living in the slums. We should be living comfortably. Jesus had essentially a money manager. That was Judas's job. And he hung out with him for a long time before it was time to betray Jesus. Everybody trusted him. When Jesus said, one of you will betray me, they didn't go, Judas. He fit in, and he was the manager of their money. Did he spend it appropriately? I don't know if he spent all of it appropriately, but they had to live as a group and travel around. They had rich friends. Jesus was temporarily buried in a rich man's tomb that had never been used before. They had friends in high places. So we don't have to adopt the ways of the world, but we have to get out in it. And we don't have to go out there with paupers and sackcloth and ashes and beg people to accept Jesus. No. We just need to go out there joyfully, dancing and leaping and praising God. If you're celebrating, people want to be part of the celebration. If you're doing good, people want to be part of that. If you're not doing good, who wants to be a part of that? Take opportunities when they come. Now, I thought I was done with acting, and I don't know that I've got any work yet, but I've been contacted for work, and so I've said, yes, I'm available. But I get to pick when I want to work. I won't work anything Disney anymore until they are taken over by somebody who's more godly minded and less worldly minded. So if I get work, I get it. If not, I don't. I'm not going to get rich off of it because I'm not in the union. I'm just doing background work or stand-in work. And it can pay anywhere from $100 to $200 a day. So I might make, 3 or 4 days a month. So it's, as I used to call, when people say, well, what do you do with the money you make? And I go, well, what, the money I make from my acting stuff? That's beer money. Now, I don't drink, but the joke there is that it's just play money. It's, if I want to go out to dinner, if I want to go to a movie, if I want to drive one more time a week to visit my son versus just, I'm only going once a week right now because it costs too much. So if they bring the price of gas down, I might go twice. Because when I go, I also buy lunch. But we're not to go around, oh, poor sorry me, I'm just a terrible person. Well, we won't argue that point. But the Christ that lives in us is not. And you've got to let him take center stage. You've got to let him display it. If I'm doing a good job and you like what I'm doing, it's not me. It's the Lord. If you don't like what I'm doing, I might be messing with it. Or God's talking to you, one or the other. But I can mess things up because I've been doing this long enough that I know how to do it myself. Not very well, not very long, and I'll probably lose all my followers if I were to dump God and just do it myself. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm just saying I have to trust God every time I do a video to let him speak through me, because you need to hear what God has to say. All right. I'm going to finish some video of me walking around, just kind of tack it on. It's not springtime yet. I'm still in long sleeves. In the sun, it's actually warm, but I'm inside of this covered area and it's a little bit cold in here. So I'm not ready to strip down to my t-shirt, which I have underneath. Not yet. Maybe next month. 2 more weeks, we change time again. I don't know if they're going to stop it or if they're going to let that time change and then not let it revert back. I don't know. They're talking about doing away with it. Some areas don't change. They think it's stupid. Bingo. But once the government starts something, it's hard for them to change it. It takes somebody with guts, because the other side's going to use it for fodder to attack with. It doesn't matter whether it's a good idea or not. The other side has to make you look bad. So they're going to criticize everything you do. You're feeding the homeless. Oh, but you only fed the homeless over here. You didn't feed the homeless over here. They're going to attack. Satan's going to attack. Just get used to it and smile. Yeah, I fed the homeless over here. I fed the homeless over there yesterday, but you weren't here. All right. Get out and enjoy this beautiful weather we got right now. And tell people about God. But don't just tell them, show them. Till we meet in the clouds. God bless. Okay, well, I'm kind of out for a short walk. I don't know how far I'm going to go. My toe is still hurting from when I kicked the ball, so I've got to kind of keep an eye on it, and my knee is still bothering me, so I got to watch how far I walk. I'm seeing smoke. I don't know where it's at. It's these trees. So somewhere over there I was seeing smoke over my shoulder. Someone's burning in there. Hopefully it's controlled burn and not an accidental burn. Well, one of the visitors that comes in here all the time was here. I've got 2 fishermen, and now I have another vehicle coming in, so there's my campsite. When they come down here, I'm going to go ahead and stop this because I got to talk to them and tell them what's going on. So here they come, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Get out and enjoy this. God created all this for you and me.